Namaskar. Welcome to another edition of
Namaskar.
Vimash podcast. So today we have with us again after a long time Professor Ajay Chaturvedi. He teaches at IIT Mandi, and recently we have seen a controversy regarding a statement by Mr. R. Education Minister Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan with regard to the Ujjain Prime Meridian or the Zero Meridian from the Indian perspective. And so I have the fortunate to have with us Professor Ajay Chaturvedi, who incidentally actually talked about a paper that he has also is working on regarding the prime meridian in Jain and the controversy regarding what's happening around this. So I had observed quite a bit of misinformation is there regarding with the prime meridian of Ujjain should be replacing the GMT zero that is in London. So with that in perspective, I warmly welcome Mr. Ajay Chaturvedi for being with us. Namaste, sir.
Namaste. Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure always to talk to you.
Uh, yeah, yes, it's pleasure of it's mine and also my audience to have you in our show. Let's start the conversation. So I just wanted to
Yeah,
get understand from you with regard to the zero prime meridian being Ujjain. So its ancient history
yeah,
and its astrological and astronomical significance. Then we will move on to
yeah.
the statements by our uh,
Sure,
Minister for Education.
sure. So you mentioned correctly. I do teach at IIT Mandi, also at IIM Rohtak, and the books I've authored in the last 1 year, I mean, which I've worked, researched for about 20 years, is the trilogy of time. So two books are available, which you've got copies of. You've read them. The third one is going to be available. I purposely held it back. There's a reason for it because there is a lot of movement going on in the world, the economy, and the things the way they are happening. So, let me give you a bit of a background on what is really happening. We are seeing the world at this juncture where there's Iran America war. There's talks of truce, but they have not been able to arrive at anything. There's the Ukraine Russia war that's going on. There is unrest almost everywhere. And typically, the way people want to explain it is, there is something that, America wants Iran not to be a nuclear power. Iran has been saying death to America for the longest time, but the real root of it is unknown to most of the people. I mean, they'll get to some historical event and they'll say this is what it is or that is what it is. But for almost everything that we trace our history back to arrive at today where we are, we need to understand the roots of those things, not just from a he said, she said perspective, but also from a very mathematical perspective, exactly what is happening. I can't just say, well, I believe that the day starts when I wake up. That's a great way to, have a positive outlook to life, or the day ends when I go to bed. That's a great way to look at it. But technically, the day begins when the sun rises, right? So, in Sanatan Parampara, in the Vedic civilization, uh, the day begins with sunrise, it ends with the next sunrise. Our day does not change over at midnight. So, why I'm saying this has to be understood in the context. For the longest time, and in all the history books, despite the history books not having been written by our own rulers, the history books have always mentioned that the colonizers, the invaders, invariably everyone came to India. I mean, they went to different places, but India was one of the centers where everyone came. Today, you talk about, Pakistan talking about Ghazwa Hind. You have different powers trying to sort of take control. They explain it in a way that India is the biggest market. Unless you're in India, you don't really make it to the in the world. I mean, if your product or the service works in India, it works everywhere. And that's true. I mean, from a relationship, from a very business economic standpoint, it works. And it's great. But let's get to the bottom of where all this begins. The narrative that we have been fed, that we are running on, is, we can say, broadly about 2000 years old, because the primary thing, and this is what one of the most critical things that I want people to examine, to think, because you cannot just arrive at something without having any of critical thought having gone behind it. So, for example, when I say, can you make a statement without any implicit or explicit usage of time? And people say, well, that's simple, come here. It doesn't have any explicit usage of time. It doesn't. It has implicit usage of time. Come here now is implicit. Now is implicit. I mean, so, but then if I were to say come here tomorrow, that means I'm explicitly saying time. Is there any statement you can make without any implicit or explicit usage? After a lot of thought, you'd come back and say, no, it's not possible. Okay, great. So we established that time can fundamentally not be disconnected from your existence. It's there. It's not something running in parallel. It's there. Okay. So when we say that our calendar that we're following today, it's April 13th, 2026. What does that mean? Where did it begin? And then in parallel, I'll also say, well, if you were to look at the Panchanga for today is Sri Shvetwaraha Kalpe Vyavasvat Manvantare Ashtati Vimsati Tame, this is 28th Kali Yoga, Pratham Charane, 2083 Vikram Samvat. And then it's 11th Vaishakha Masa, Krishna Pakshe Ekadashi Titho. What's the nakshatra today? I've one second. Huh? We need to edit this one.
Yeah. We can.
1 second. I'll just
No problem.
Yeah. But I'm just gonna tell you. So let's just edit this piece out, because when I say Dhanishta Nakshatra, that's what the nakshatra is. So when we say that specific, and you would wonder, that's your belief system, and we don't follow it, we don't believe in it. Technically, there is no belief in Sanatan Dharma. What we have is Vishwas. Vishwas is Shwas. It's a special kind of breathing. So you're able to tune in to the nakshatras, to the universe. That's what is connecting to the universe. The reason I'm telling you this is, a Panchanga has to be so detailed. You could tell the date in a second, but the Panchanga has to be understood, imbibed, and really sort of, you're coming down, expressing this is your space-time coordinate. So it is a far more sophisticated way of denoting time on where we are. And then, in a typical Sankalpa, you'll say the entire Panchanga, then you'll say Bharat Varshe, Bharat, Jambu Dvita, Bharat Varshe, Bharat Khande. I am, for example, in Uttarakhand Pradesh. So, you'll go on to like that, and you'll define the specific space-time. But you never find this happening in the Western construct, the current narrative that we're going through. And you begin to question. Something bigger can give, birth to something smaller, but it doesn't happen the other way around. You can't derive these tithis and nakshatras from purely just saying from 13th April 2026. I can't derive any of these things. But from a Panchanga, when I'm saying it, I can derive all these things. So 11th Vaishakha translates now from the format that we're going through to 13th April. So then you begin to question that invaders came to India, the colonizers came to India. You never hear of the Indians or the Hindus having gone abroad. They went for trade, for merchandising, but not otherwise. So now it brings me to a very important question. When you talk about 2026 Gregorian calendar, the current calendar that we're following, it began 2026 years ago, right? But 2083, it began 2083 years ago, which is 57 years older than the Gregorian calendar. Now, that's where the history is changed. It says Varahamihir, who I know the research that, and refer to the books that I'm talking about, the Trilogy of Time, Varahamihir is the primary Rishi, the brain behind Vikram Samvat. and it was launched in Ujjain by Maharaja Vikramaditya. So then you start to wonder if Varahamihira, like the history books tell you, came in the 6th century, let's accept it, because I'd like to value a scholar's opinion. Okay, great. So then you tell me, where does the Gregorian calendar begin out of the blue? And then, how do they get the weekdays? The calendar begins on a Sunday. Accept it. I mean, I'll accept everything you say, but you have to give me a technical reason. I can't just tell you, well, it begins. It were fine if Sunday was invented by the Western calendar, by the Western, civilizations. Technically, they're not a civilization, but let's say if it were, where did it begin? Where is the definition? So when you start Googling, when you start researching, it says, Greco-Roman literature, the Greek mythology, the Book of Dead, Epic of Gilgamesh. I've researched all these books. There is absolutely no definition of time. There's no definition of weekdays. There is no definition of 24 hours. There's no definition of 60. How do you get 60? We are working in a predominantly decimal system. How do you get 24 hours? No explanations for that. Then you start to question the narrative. So if it began in Ujjain, why Ujjain? That's Vikram Samvat. And now to tell you from the research, so this is, let's assume we know nothing. I'll just start to question and I have no answers. I don't get any answers when I start asking the Gregorian calendar itself. But then if I start to question the Vikram Samvat, there were thousands of calendars Samvats before Vikram Samvat. What we are following now is Vikram Samvat. That was launched in Ujjain. And even otherwise, the Bhumadhya Rekha or the zero meridian passes through Ujjain. It passes through the Vindhyavasini temple. It passes through Ujjain and it goes all the way down. When you start to look at the scriptures, be it Surya Siddhanta, be it Brihat Samhita, be it Pancha Siddhantika, all of them mention and explicitly explain what these are. This is not mythical. This is not something prayer oriented. In fact, there is absolutely nothing mythical in the Sanatana Dharma. There was a time that I would have accepted, well, hypothetically, let's say it's mythical. I don't really know what it means. But today, after having researched all that, I can confidently tell you that every single thing has a meaning. There is absolutely no belief system over here. So now coming back to your query, sorry for giving you this background, but now let's come back to this. If you look at Greenwich, and I've been to Greenwich, there is an observatory there, but that's about it, right? So the fundamental, again, belief that it starts with in the 15th century is that the universe is mechanistic. There is no proof of it. It's just believed. It's a mechanistic universe. So they, etch it in stone, Galileo comes up with a formula for gravity. It says 9.8 meters per second square. Later on, Newton discovers, after the apple falling, there is gravitational force. But then there is absolutely no mention about the Vedic civilization. Dr. Stephen Hawking writes A Brief History of Time. You read it 4-5 times. The book has absolutely no explanation of why weekdays, why 24 hours, why 360 degrees, nothing. It in fact doesn't even mention Vedic civilization. So that makes me even more curious. Why aren't you even talking about it? Because the Vedic civilization clearly defines all these parameters. It defines 24 hours, 360 degrees. Where do you get the 60 degrees minutes from, 60 seconds, all that. That's Ghatika, Vighatika. And that's all very, very logically, mathematically explained. And how do we know it? Because the Panchanga is clearly telling you that. So the study that, the entire books, the research is all technical research. In fact, the papers that I'm presenting are, very technical. So when you start looking at the data, the monsoon can be predicted just looking at the Panchanga in a 3-4 day range, right? Maximum deviation we have is 3-4 days. But looking at the Gregorian calendar, it could be a 44-day range. No matter how precisely you're measuring the atmospheric pressure and the moisture and whatever you have to. So the thing is that Bhumadhya Rekha, as it's defined, is considered the navel of the earth. Okay, it is the center. And that is where all the measurements go on from. Now, when you quoted the Mahakal conference, the Master of Time, I was thrilled to be there, thrilled to be a part of it, thrilled to speak there with different scholars. The problem is most of the people are not talking about not only the correctness of the Panchanga, but the fact that science just assumes time. It doesn't really define it. It just takes it up, right? That's why science is today talking about quantum, is talking about, there is time. But what is it? What are you measuring? You're measuring durations between two events, but you don't really know what you're measuring, right? And so when Sri Dharmendra Pradhan made that statement, first of all, he didn't say what has come out in the media. That's not what he said. He said something fairly simple, and it would make sense. If I were to, and now this actually relates to the crop cycles. If you're the center, India is the food bowl of the world. India at one point used to have 2 lakhs varieties of rice. And that has been reduced because when the colonizers came, they wanted to standardize everything, control the agriculture, control the output, so that they could control the narrative. They didn't come here to colonize; came here to wipe you out completely. But then they realized it is a productive economy. Why don't we just use the same production, standardize it, and mass produce it? That's the fundamental problem that you're going on, which is leading to sustainability problem because you're producing little, you're consuming a lot. The marketing driven economy uses the Gregorian calendar because it's able to decide, look, we'll run this marketing campaign and this will sell. We'll run that marketing campaign and that will sell. But what are you producing? Because that production depends on the Panchanga, on the entire, the solar movement, the lunar movement, the stellar cycles, because the rains are mapped to the stellar cycles, the nakshatras. It's linked to the moon. When you get to the depth of it, you realize that that center makes far more sense. I can't map this to Gregorian calendar starting from Greenwich. What crop does a farmer need to farm has absolutely no link to 23rd April. Nothing. I mean, you can't say rains begin on 1st June. They don't. But you can map it to Vrikshira Masa, Uttarashada Nakshatra, and it comes in a watery nakshatra versus the air nakshatra. All those things are very technical. So you're getting a parameter, like 5 points, data points that you can compare it with, zero it down, then farm, and your crops will be successful. So a long explanation for a very short question, but this is the background to it. What Sri Dharmendra Pradhan said was very logical. It made complete sense to me. It was twisted out of context because, again, the same thing. When you start comparing belief systems, there are two primary belief systems that we have, Islam and Christianity. There's a belief, there's no understanding, there is no reality to it, you can't prove anything. In Sanatan, in Vedic, there is absolute understanding of what you're doing. So whether you're an atheist or a theist or whatever hell you want to believe in, you'll still focus back on time. We are fundamentally worshippers of time. For us, it makes sense to have the uh, zero meridian going from Ujjain because that is where Mahākāla is, the Lord of Time, the Master of Time. I mean, it sounds mythical, it sounds story-like, but it's not. That's because we've been conditioned for the longest time. Einstein says time is imaginary. I mean, he's probably talking about a very specific sort of an understanding. It is not imaginary. If it were imaginary, you should be imagining something totally different. I should be imagining something totally different. But we're not. When I say 13th April, you're obviously, at 13th April. So anyway, long answer for a short question, but that's the
Yeah.
explanation.
Yes. So, just to delve a bit more on the controversy and the statement and the reaction which was there. So, like I
Yeah,
was observing the reactions on the social media, on the mainstream media, and it was really like the depth of understanding which I had read your book. I also talked to you.
yeah,
So, but
yeah,
unfortunately, a lot of people do not read the books or do not have access to people who actually explain to them what really is
right,
happening in terms of concept of time and how it is very, very important to our existence. As you mentioned,
right,
in all our epics,
yeah,
we
yeah,
time is time is the denoter when and what happened. Like where
yeah,
it happened, it always has a nakshatra and other astronomical position there to actually pinpoint
Yeah.
when did Kurukshetra Yuddha happen and where it happened.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
in that context, like, would you
Yeah.
like to suggest something that actually, so that the mainstream media or the social media or the other people are comparing what when we change, let's say we have zero meridian as Ujjain, will that help us become
Yeah.
next China? Like, that's an irrelevant question. There is
Yeah.
no connection between
So,
India becoming China or as advanced as China scientifically and having
yeah.
the prime meridian being Ujjain. So how do you connect these two, or how do you advise people to process this information?
See, it's a matter of getting the perspective right. You know, I can buy a new car, and the dealership tells me, the car manufacturer tells me, look, you got this great Mercedes E-Class. It gives you 10 kilometers to a liter, and I'm thrilled. Okay. They have a baked in assumption that it's a straight road, plain road, smooth road. You probably have four people sitting in the car, and it's the utmost grade of petrol that you put in the car. But what if you're now going at an incline of 30 degrees on a road? The road is all cobbled, it's not smooth. And instead of four people, there are 20 people sitting in the car. The average would not be 10 kilometers to a liter, right? But that is dynamic nature of understanding. If you understand your assumptions, then you can do better on your predictions. The problem with current narrative is you got assumptions that you can't explain. Science made an assumption. I mean, it's very accurate. And I'm not saying that science is not measuring things accurately. The problem is not accuracy. The problem is, are you measuring the right thing? Because right now we measure the second perfectly, but what is second a part of? 24 hours divided to 60 minutes divided to 1 hour to 60 minutes. 1 minute is 60 seconds. But what is that 24 hours? Where does it come from? Right? When you go deeper into the Surya Siddhanta, the Vedic literature, you realize that 24 hours is actually a division of time. It's not a measurement of time. A civilization is only civilized, the society can only become civilized if they're measuring in tune with nature. If they're not measuring in tune with nature, you're not civilized, right? Because in order to be civilized, I need to be civil. Like, I'm giving you something, I'm getting something equally good in return. But if not, then you're not civilized. The only way we can do that is we are measuring in tune with nature. Now, NASA has said that the moon is receding by 3.8 centimeters every year. Okay, it says the sun is losing mass. You can go to the Puranas, you can refer, and it says the sun has lost 16 Rashmis, so it's lost 15 Rashmis since Swayambhu Manvantara to now. That means we've lost, 15 Rashmis of the 16. We've literally left with almost, and then the Manvantaras will start to go back. It doesn't talk about the moon. So if Sri Ram was born in the 23rd Treta Yuga, when you look at his birth chart, like it specifically describes Chaitra Mas, Shukla Paksh Navami, all the grahas were in Uchchasthana, right? The moon and Jupiter are in Purnarvakshu Nakshatra, which is when Brihaspati is exalted. It's in the Lagna. But it's a very specific, dictum, but it does not measure the position of Rahu and Ketu, which is the lunar nodes. Now, if I were to talk specifics, it's giving you a hint of how the universe itself, the Brahmanda itself is changing all the time. It's giving you specifics on the things it can, but otherwise it's leaving it fluid for you to interpret it. Okay? Now, the reason I'm telling you this is if you understood that, then you'll map the positions correctly based on the understanding you had that time. And that understanding has to keep changing all the time. Even the sun is moving southwards or northwards a degree every day. It's not something that I'm saying. The sun is rising either 1 degree, northwards every day or southwards, depending on, which ayana it's following. The moon is changing, the grahas are moving, everything, charachar jagat. If everything is changing, then I can't limit it to a mechanistic fixed universe. Our problem that is coming today is because we've made an assumption that we can't justify. And we're blaming the whole world when what we really need to be doing is fixing the assumptions. In Sanatan Dharma, in the Vedic literature, we have defined those assumptions. First of all, there are no assumptions. But even if there were, they've defined everything clearly. They're telling you, look, and incidentally, the painting behind me is the seven horses and the sun. Okay? This is probably the most explicit definition of time that in the research in the 20 years I've seen. And again, people who studied science like I have, like you have, you're like, oh, no, 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 it doesn't really make any sense because, you need to have a specific this and that kind of a definition in science. We confuse English for science. But when you come down to
Exactly.
the very basic thumbtacks, I need to be able to explain something to an absolute novice with just a symbol. So what does it do? It shows, look, this is the sun. You've seen it. It has a chariot, which has a charioteer, which has no legs. Charioteer has no legs and has seven horses. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to, if you start to question it from a very physical perspective. I mean, it's the sun. Look, it needs at least a million horses. That's not the point. It is telling you the seven aspects of time. So there's day and night. There's the lunar phases, which is the waning or the waxing. There's the weekdays. There's the muhurtas. There's the ayana, which is southward or northward movement of the sun. There's the year, and there's the month. Like that, there are seven aspects of time that you take all of those into consideration, because what you're really doing is measuring the duration between two events. So there's a snapshot here and there's a snapshot here. The current duration that we measure is the snapshot of this snapshot. The sun would have moved visibly. At night, the moon would have moved visibly. So we're measuring very specific things. So now coming back to your query, if you were to look at this scientifically, everyone keeps saying scientifically, scientifically, and people say, I believe in science. You cannot believe in science. The very nature of science is for you to question it. Belief is, I believe, I'm feeling this love. Why am I feeling it? I don't really know. I don't really. Vishwas is not that. You're basically tuning in, you understand 2 plus 2 is 4. It makes sense. Mathematics. The operation plus means something over here. If it was 2, line over 2, it would be 1 because it's division. 2x2 is 4. It's multiplication. So the fundamental nature of questioning and understanding the very foundations is very important. And those assumptions right now is what we are missing. That is what needs to be redefined. So people are fighting this absolutely, misleading battle. In fact, they don't even know what they're fighting for. Right now, there are people who are opposing it. They don't know what they're opposing. If the meridian were to come back to Ujjain, it will benefit the whole world. We'll fundamentally solve the sustainability crisis. And this is what I've explained in the books. This is what, it's a credible paper, peer reviewed by, fellow scientists and others. And I'm giving, very hardcore technical data. There's not some, interpretive that, I can understand it, but you can't. No, you can literally see it clearly. For example, for me, it doesn't make any sense when the weekday changes at midnight. What's happening at midnight? Why did you change something? It has to change at sunrise. Look, there is a fundamental event that has happened in the nature. Sun has risen, so the weekday changed. It's linked to the seven grahas, right? Things like that. So fundamentally, what we are lacking right now is the ability to explain our assumptions, but we're fighting for it, and we can't explain it. That's why it's looking so maddening. Most of the people, especially the journalists, don't really understand. They don't have the patience or the time to go deeper into it. That's why I wrote the books. People want to be simplified. Well, I've simplified it. You can't simplify it because that oversimplification is what has led us to this point today. Just assuming time. It doesn't make sense.
Yes. So if I can just summarize what you had mentioned, what you have said for
Yeah,
10 minutes. One is
yeah,
that we have like converted our thought process while
yeah,
the Surya Siddhanta or the Sanatan way of measuring time is
yeah,
connect time with the environment or the nature. while
yeah,
the so-called scientific method is just
yeah,
using mechanical way to actually understand time, like midnight
yeah,
time changes, but
yeah.
technically sun goes down, sun sun goes
Comes
up again.
up.
So
Yeah,
it comes
yeah,
up. So it should be changing at that time because our cycles are connected with sun, with energy. So you cannot
yeah,
have
yeah,
technically a midnight time change. So this mechanical aspect
yeah,
of how we perceive time, how we measure time, has
yeah,
caused a lot
yeah,
of issues in terms of economy,
yeah,
in terms of health, in terms of also geopolitics
yeah,
itself, because your environment
yeah.
changes your perspective. So we have
Right.
desert people who are doing a lot of violence. Okay. Now
Exactly. Exactly.
there are there are multi-layered perspectives which we need to understand,
Yeah.
that your environment shapes your
Yeah.
perspective, and that perspective has
Yeah.
meant that maybe 500 billion people have been died at the hands of people who are from the deserts, both the
Yeah.
Abrahamic religions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
connected, but it
Yeah.
needs
Yeah.
to be explained in a very simple way to audience who do not know how
Yeah.
to, like, layer by layer decipher these things. And that's why your books are very important,
Right.
and also your perspective.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just one more thing,
So
sir.
I'll.
So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. No.
Please go
No. So
ahead.
I'll give a very simple explanation here. If I assume that there is a mango grove or an apple orchard, for example, okay, there is an apple orchard. We've taken it for granted that we have it available to us. Okay, so I'll start making, let's say, apple juice with it. Okay, and then I start realizing this apple juice is great, right? And I'm going to start making it more, but then the apples have run out. So I work on like a formula to create something similar to an apple juice. It's a synthetic apple juice. But now people are already aware of the apple juice that I'm selling. So I start selling it as apple juice, apple cider, whatever else. Okay. Today's products are exactly that, by the way. So, when it says mango ice cream, it has no mango. It has got some resin which, resembles the mango. It gives you the taste, but it's like got no milk. Milk ice cream has no milk. Cream has no cream. It's all like emulsifiers and palm oil based, right? Which is why it's harmful. So after a while, they start to just sell this apple juice, which is like there's got no apples in it. It's just something that's running. So it's got disconnected from it, right? And you're literally selling it throughout the year. Let's say somebody else starts to sell, apple jam, right? So you start making apple jam. You need more apples, but you really don't have more apples. So you start to grow, apples. You start to plunder nature. You're like, why isn't it growing? Put more fertilizer, do whatever else. I'll start doing these. Two different kinds of people, but they're all doing fundamentally things against nature. Okay. So this person who's selling the apple juice, after let's say 50 years, his descendants come back and say, apple orchards are pure myth. They don't exist. Well, if they are pure myth, where did you get the apple from? The first apple. They can't explain it, right? And that is where, while it seems complicated, but it's a very simple thing. So the starting point has to be very clear. If now we go back to why I'm talking about the starting point. Science starts from around the 15th century. Okay, accepted. Galileo gives you a formula for gravitation, 9.8 meters per second square. A lot of people come back, well, no, Rishi Pippala gave this theory of gravitation. Rig Veda talks about theory of gravitation. Atharva Veda talks about theory of gravitation. And a typical person like me would go back and say, well, tell me where is the theory of gravitation. And when lo and behold, when you read it, the Vedic literature, the Surya Siddhanta, Rishi Pippala, Rishi Pippala talks specifically about pranavayu and apanavayu in relation to Guruttvakarshana. So higher the gravitation, lower your breathing rate, and you live longer. Okay. But what did Galileo do differently? He gave you a rate, 9.8 meters per second square. The thing to ask over here in question is, where does the second come from? They say it's very simple. It's 24 hours, 60 minutes per hour, 60 seconds per minute. And that's how we got to the. That's great. How do you get the 24 hours? They have no explanation. They say Greco Roman literature, our ancestors did this. It's not there. All of that comes from the Vedic literature. It's literally like we've got the apple orchard, they've taken the apple juice. After a while, they've started to question, no, no, apple orchards are imaginary. Well, where did you get the first apple? That's exactly where this is right now. Until we are able to explain. So I'm explaining this as simply as I can because people are just not ready to accept. No, no, science is perfect. I'm not saying science is not perfect. The problem is not the perfection in science. The problem is the assumptions have to change now. Okay. If the sun is losing mass, if the moon is receding, the day has longer elongated. A lot of people come back, well, in quantum, it doesn't matter. All we're looking is the brief, that moment. It doesn't matter. If you're timing something, that timing has to be related to the days and nights and the number of years because that is what we're running on. We can't say, well, according to my seconds, you're about 20 years old right now. Well, that's not how it works because you work on solar cycles. And in Sanatan, we celebrate Tithi Pravesha, which is immunocomplex, right? That gives you the actual age. So coming back to the same point, explaining it simply is possible if people want to understand the basics and start from there. You can't have a debate like, apple cider is perfect, it's great in taste. And when these guys, they're so rich, they sold so many juice cans, and they're claiming that apple orchards are pure myth, then they must be right. That's not how it works. The debate has to go in a very different way. The original apple orchards were here. That's what people came to loot. India's wealth was far more than you can imagine. And if the central meridian, the zero meridian, were to come back to Ujjain, which eventually it has to happen because the sustainability problem cannot be solved. You have to get your time measurement right. Even with respect to the Iran and America war, America is following a pure solar calendar, which is a purely extractive calendar. Iran is following a lunar calendar. And by the way, Saudi Arabia has already discontinued, dropped the 2016 onwards, the Hijri calendar. To a normal person, it doesn't make any difference. Like, no, no, it doesn't matter. It matters because your calendar has to give you everything. You can't have a religious calendar and an economic calendar. Your calendar gives you everything. Vikram Samvat, regardless of what you're following, Gregorian or not, is what runs the economy over here. So I hope that makes some sense.
Yes, sir. Correct, because you are in that Mahakal conference, okay. Like
Yeah,
if you, let's say, like you had to announce this news, or you had to, like, you are like addressing the media, what was done by
yeah.
Mr. Trivedi Pradhan. How would you
Dharmendra Pradhan, yeah.
explain it yeah, in your way that this controversy could have been avoided? Like, would you like to rephrase what Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan said, our honorable uh, Minister for Education?
Actually, the controversy would have come up regardless because people right now are opposing because it sounds Hindu, it sounds Vedic, we're opposed to it. But why are you opposed to it? Right now, the problem is that they're not able to understand. Like, for example, if I were to tell you, Islam cannot survive without Hinduism, Christianity cannot survive without Hinduism. They are fundamentally going to feed on something, right? The wealth creation is happening in India only. Again, this is a very, very controversial statement. It sounds like it, but it's not. If it were, right, if it weren't, a lot of people wouldn't be coming here. This is the market, this is the place where wealth is created from linked to nature. America has tech companies, that's fantastic. It's circulation of wealth, it's not creation of wealth. The creation has to be linked to production. The basic thing that we are proposing today, because look, again, this is not a single line solution. You're talking about, everybody is talking about sustainability problems. What is sustainability? We're spending too much, we're making too little. Great. In Hindi, it's called Amdani Athane Kharcha Rupaiya. Okay, fantastic. What do you really mean with it? If they are selling more meat, if they're selling more products, where are those products being made? Let me, give you a very practical example. Look at FMCG products in the past 50 years. You can't name a single product, 60 years, 70 years, where the size gone up in price. And look at, Maggie, shampoos, namkeen, chips, whatever you want. those products are fundamentally made from something that is being extracted. So, for example, potato chips are made from potatoes. What is the scarcity that is happening? If you're selling more, the product price should go down, the quality should go up. It's not. That whole idea of the economic theory and it's running on marketing campaigns. Like literally all the unicorns that you know of are logistics startups. There, when somebody says Zomato is a food tech startup, it's not. It's a logistics startup.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So
Yeah.
these logistics startups are fundamentally focused on marketing and selling. They're not worried about what was the farmer cultivating over here before. And I'll tell you practical examples. There are places, let's say Uttarakhand, let's say you go to Dehradun. There were basmati fields, and there was a time that you could walk in, drive into this place and smell the fresh basmati. Today, it's got, buildings, multi-story buildings coming up. Technically speaking, population is going down. Who's buying these flats? I don't know. There are many malls coming up in Gurgaon, in everywhere. I mean, people are just like sort of as if the food is just going to come out of thin air. It's not, So marketing driven economy to a production driven economy. That production driven economy runs on Vikram Samvat. Marketing driven economy works on Gregorian calendar. As simple as that. Organizing becomes easy. If we have to start benefiting everyone, the farmers, the producers, the mandi owners, whoever, then we have to move to production driven economies because the current shortage, the sustainability problem we are talking about, is this. The ocean have run out of fish because they've fished so much. They've got fisheries crisis. And all these are not, stories that I'm telling. These are all case studies that I've done. They're in the books. I've given specific examples of, what crops they sort of took away, what cultivation that needed to be done. That's not being done anymore. And a lot of this was done during the colonization. So if we need to move to a producer's economy, we have to move to a Vikram Samvat. And that Vikram Samvat will always be calculated from Ujjain because that's where the Mahākāla is. That's where the calculations are done. That's where the Panchangas are made. Different places, of course, have Panchangas, Odisha, Kerala, but this is where the main center is. So from a normal person's perspective, these are the most critical things that we need to observe and take effect as soon as possible. This is not something that we're looking at futuristic. For survival of the masses, you need to start observing your coordinates right. And this is not just for Hindus, it's for everyone. Regardless, Muslims, Christians, they can claim whatever superiority they want. A Quran does not define time. As simple as that. Bible does not define time. Only the Vedas do. The moment you understand that, Vikram Samvat, Ujjain, Mahākāla will make sense.
Thank you. I think like you have explained it well. I think I hope people who are listening to this, it might be difficult
Yeah.
to actually layer by layer break it down. Maybe if we have time later, maybe in about three
Yeah.
months time, we might
Yeah.
work on a let's say a small animation project to actually explain your
Yeah, let's do
ideas
that.
into this in small bits for people to actually
Yeah.
consume as animation because the daily grind of a normal person. Okay,
Yeah.
that seven
Yeah.
five
They think it's
layers
not.
of
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah, seven
Yeah.
five layers of breaking it down and down and down, and then understanding that okay,
Yeah.
time is something which is like I give my example. Okay, to the
Yeah.
audience. Correct. I have
Yeah.
changed my job. Now I wake up at
Yeah.
6 a.m. Go to office
Yeah.
at 9 a.m. Come back to
Yeah.
5:30, and then do my
Yeah.
things and go to sleep at 10. Now,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
whole lifestyle, in terms of whatever issues I had, lifestyle diseases, hypertension,
Yeah.
depression, all those things which occurs because you're working whole night, your health goes down, your mental
Right.
health goes down, you had bad
Yeah.
relationships with your family, and your
Yeah.
perspective is the world is not a good place to live. But
Yeah.
if you just sync your life with nature,
Yeah.
then the world looks
Yeah.
beautiful place to live. So that's
yeah,
what a lot of like some person said to me, that only
yeah,
dharma celebrates life. So for dharma,
absolutely,
we need
absolutely.
we need Vikram Sampat to come up
Yeah,
and also
yeah,
re-engage ourselves, get in sync
yeah,
with nature. Like you don't
yeah,
have to drink apple juice every day. Drink it from January to
absolutely.
March,
You get
January to
exactly. Yeah,
March, and then have
yeah,
a mango. Like have mango in April, and that's
yeah,
how
totally.
your body is attuned to it. Why you have to drink every
Right,
day apple juice for no reason?
right. So, for example, Hiranyakashipu, we've all heard stories of Hiranyakashipu. But what is Hiranyakashipu? He's not enmity against Sri Vishnu. So he says, don't worship Vishnu, worship me. See, you got to understand when Puranas, when the Vedas define Kala, it says there's Chetana, which is consciousness, and then there is Kala. Kala has three gunas. There is Brahma, which is Rajoguna. There is Sri Vishnu, which is the, you know, which is giving you so much of the year. So this is the Sattva. And there is this expansion and contraction, which is Tamoguna, which is Shiva, Mahadev. Now, if you go deeper into it, Brahma has got four heads, had a fifth head, shot out of Sri Shiva. Sri Vishnu rests on Sheshanaga, and Mahadev Shiva has Vasuki around his neck. That's a Sarpa, you know. Kal Sarpil Gati se chalta hai, runs like a serpent. This is all descriptions given in the Puranas, because even if the Vedas and the Puranas, are giving so much of clarity, it's just that we're not looking at it the right way. So if this is Shri Vishnu, he says, look, there is summer, you have mangoes, enjoy some heat. There's winter, you have cool, cold weather, wear something warm, have apples. In the monsoon, have rains, enjoy some water, the crop is going to be good. And in spring, this is the weather. Now you say, no, 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 I want apples in summer, I want mangoes in winter, I want to do temperature control. What do you think this is? This is exactly fighting against Shri Vishnu. He's like, don't go by Vishnu, I give you whatever you need. So Hiranyakashipu is no different from Trump today. Okay. So the stories have a deeper meaning that we need to understand. When people say, I like to be with nature, I like to tune into nature, how do you tune into nature? Nature is sunrise, nature is sunset, nature is moonrise, nature is moonset. The Kumbh Mela happening with the uh, Jupiter with Brihaspati, Guru transitioning, and so when it comes to Kumbh Rashi, meets the sun in Kumbh Rashi, that's when Kumbh Mela happens. I mean, these are very, very technical, logical things. We started to confuse science for English. That's the biggest colonization. Second, we started confusing time from clocks. Time is not what is happening in the clock, it's just giving you a duration. The real time, Kala, is happening outside. Look at the nature, that's what is happening. So I think huge scope, but this is, of course, my life mission, because I genuinely think that, a lot of ignorance can be cleared up if people start observing the same things. And we're not. And I
Yes,
think
yes.
this is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, so we have a few comments that we will take, and then
Yeah.
we'll wrap up.
Sure, sure, sure,
So
sure. Yeah.
Vyom is asking, Surya Siddhanta
Yeah.
talks about two types of kala. Has this
Yeah.
topic been analyzed by the author? By you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which two types of kala are you talking about?
If Vyom is there, okay, I think he has. He says Mahakal and Khandakal.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So the first,
again, you have to understand perspectives, but in order to arrive at Khandakal, you have to start from Mahakal. That is what a Sankalpa is. If you were to ask me, does it matter to you, your forefathers and their forefathers and their forefathers are all in, Shvetwaraha Kalpe. So Sri Shvetwaraha Kalpa is the one, and I've explained this very clearly. That's starting from Swayambhu Manvantara, Swayambhu, Swarochesh, and then it comes down to the seventh Manvantara, which is Vaivas Manvantara. In every Manvantara, there are 71 Chatur Yugas. In Vaivasvat Manvantara, 23rd Treta Yuga is when Ramayana, the one that we studied today, the one that we have access to, is happened in there. In the 28th Dwapar Yuga, is when Mahabharata, the one that we are introduced to, happened. We are in the 28th Kali Yuga Pratham Charana. So while the Mahakal is not important for us, but it's important for us to know where we are. The Khandakal is what is important. Hey, Bhupendra, what? Because you can say, let's have a podcast. What's my first question? When? The second question is where. You want to have like online, of course, podcast is online. So, the only question over here would be when. But if you were to say, let's meet, my first question is when do you want to meet? Where do you want to meet? And those are interlinked questions. So Khandakal is important from a relationship perspective. Mahakal is important from understanding exactly where you are. Because that will help you determine the gunas. If I were to say that I'm in Satyuga, the gunas would be predominantly Sattva. In Kali Yuga, the guna is predominantly Tamoguna. So a lot of meat cutting, a lot of disturbing things. I mean, what's happening right now in the world is literally that, excessive Tamoguna. People are excessively involved in this consumption. The interesting thing is, in Vavasvat Manvantara, we are in the lowest of Manvantaras. After this, we are in the 28th Kali Yuga. After, 71st, we'll start going back up. Right? This is the first Kalpa. The second one is this. This is the Damru of Mahadev. This is the Damat that they're talking about in Shivtanda Stotram. So these are very important things. The problem is we got so focused on the micromanagement of this is a second. That's great. Understanding the tiniest drop of an ocean is great, but that does not help you determine what the next big wave is. To understand the next big wave, you need to understand the ocean. That understanding the ocean is Mahakal. You don't need to understand all of it, but you need to have a knowledge that, look, there is a possibility of this, right? And it's an inevitable possibility. It's not like possibility in terms of when it will happen. It's not whether it will happen or not. It will happen. So I hope that
Uh,
answers.
Yes. So my final question, which I was actually thinking about for a long time. So you mentioned, correct, so
Yeah,
that the time runs through cycles. It's cyclical.
yeah,
So
yeah,
with currently we are seeing, correct, from South India to East India to Bangladesh and even in
yeah,
Pakistan and some other regions, we are seeing
yeah,
Vishnu murtis are being dug out. Yeah,
yeah,
in social media, we see
yeah,
quite often
yeah,
Vishnu Murti is being found. It's buried in the
yeah.
ground. Is it something symbolic in terms of the change of energy, the change of cycle which is taking place, and now Bharat is $40 economy and it will become bigger and bigger. So is this a
Sure.
symbolic representation that the energy and the Kala Chakra is moving and Bharat again is going to become the center of the world?
Absolutely. So, one, I'd like to maybe slightly deviate you from, we say that this is man-made, this is, something that's coming out. Is this symbolic or not? Leave that aside. Everything is happening by the divine will. Let it not sound prophetic. Let it not sound like, it's completely sort of mythical. It's not. For example, when um, the terrorist who was found, he had a kalava tied on his hand. I
Yeah.
forget his name.
Yes.
The
Kasab.
Pakistani was Kasab. Kasab was found. Their eventual goal was to just be dead and found with that kalava so that people would think it's a Hindu terrorist. But it didn't happen. Would you say that it's a divine will? Absolutely. So is this like a Shri Vishnu happening? Is there like a white bearded man or a man with four hands sitting up in the sky trying to manage all these things? It's not. You got to understand the universe is being driven by intention. Okay. There's a flow that is happening, but also if you try to interrupt that flow, which is beyond your control, that the will, free will for me is this. I can choose to do something, but if it really happens or not is beyond my free will, right? I can press a button to make something happen in, let's say, California in the United States. So I can, take my phone, make that call. That's it. My free will ends over there. Whether that call fructifies, whether the person who I intended to contact picks it up, whether he or she does what I wanted them to do is out of my free will, right? And that is what the divine will is talking about. So they intended him to be a Hindu terrorist. They intended him to be dead, but that's all they could do. After that, he was found alive. He was captured, and the whole plan fell flat. Had that not happened, what would have happened? Imagine, right? Today, Hindus would be declared terrorists, and lots of things would be done against the people. Colonel Purohit would still be in jail. He would not be a brigadier, which, by the way, is a fantastic, move by the army, the Indian army. So when you start understanding those chain of events, you start seeing that the statues of Sri Vishnu being discovered or things that are happening because that whole pushback is now coming. Is India going to be a superpower? Absolutely. There is no doubt whatsoever. You can do whatever. Of course, you've been doing it. For 1500 years, we've been attacked. Not once, not twice. And again, a lot of people, they like to think that Hindus are weak people, they are not brave. That's not the point at all. If there is a swarm of mosquitoes coming towards you, and you say, well, if this guy bites me, I'm going to bite him back, that's stupidity. A swarm of mosquitoes is exactly meant to do what they're meant to do. You can't compete with them. You can't fight with them the way they are fighting with, because they've come to bite you. You, on the other hand, what you can do is, clean up your environment. There'll be no mosquitoes. And again, for intelligent, it's enough to understand what you need to do. Does not have to be, you don't have to measure yourself from the perspective of somebody who doesn't have a control of their own assumptions. So I've said something very deep, something profound. What all is happening because of what is coming. I can tell you it's going to rain depending on what the wind feels like, if there's coolness in the temperature, if there's clouds in the skies. I can't say things otherwise. So these are sort of indicative, happenings that tell you what is going to happen in the future. And India is on the rise. There is absolutely nothing that can change it. No more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. We will again connect and
Lovely.
discuss some other things to talk about and see, meet you as
Yeah.
well sometime. So thank you. Jai Shri
Lovely.
Ram, Vande Mataram.
Thank you. Jai Shri Ram. Vande Mataram. Jai Bharat.